Hey, can people do the thing I said to do in the chat, please? Whoever is the 2A, please put your name and 2A in the chat. Okay. Welcome to the Richard B. Sadako tutorial. I am Zahir Sheikh, a debate coach at Emory University. The participants in this debate are all right, off to a good start. 1 second, I got to check the pairing. The participants in this debate are liberal arts and science, representing the affirmative. The first affirmative is Danielle Gu, and the second affirmative is Ian Poe. And Greenhill, representing the negative. The first negative is Lindsay Jade Feinstein or Feinstein. Could be one or the other. And the second negative is Shruti Siva. The evaluators of this debate are Professors Burgess, Virgo, and myself. All right, let's do it.
Cool. What I see was sent out to everybody. Let me know if you didn't get it.
Once I get to download it,
Yeah, just let me know when you're good to start. Okay, is anybody not ready to start? Awesome. First is the data, so the passage to the rapid DNA massively extended the scope of low quality data collection into training civilians is guilty so pervades the go inside 20. The rapid data is decided data set position to place that so not clean from other data sources, just as certain rapidly see rapid data peering training centers the guilty social purpose in either degree companies, reduce the rapid data I see the devices to validate to samples and expansion of data collection facilities massive government to buy surveillance and the creation of suspect populations just waiting to match our crime by 19. The government organ campaign creating these suspects spreading mass national database rapid data generating to receive the police collecting data from people will merely change the accident data. The government will do everything that already did to not to change or totally right or no right safety and it was about having there was a profitable election data because to become a similar sort of government administration, having used surveillance technology to render the time profits success DNA technology or computer sign in which we are already master of crime. And DNA evidence is riddled errors that create all communications and auto presumption guilt, whatever DNA is default. Certain 15. DNA is obviously it's so default to delicious cross generation levels of certificate ordinance problems of Mr. Degrade contaminants and holds so far reports of DNA matches by ceaseful investigation law enforcement unfettered DNA matches for presumption guilt and policy interaction by being shown to plan evidence of crime scene. The general cause can be duplicate or shutter artificial DNA maliciously investigators that company will be the ability to samples or profiles increasing with side media of fraud responsibilities. And the Trump administration started collecting data from all detained immigrants or code essentially that causes over-colonization in segment migrant populations. 320. Trump began collecting DNA samples that represented the samples are permitted the advocate for entry into biometry databases. This altered purpose of DNA collection population surveillance argument. Illegal DNA collection be standard on use of affiliates as part of drug tribe to criminalize them. Against the FBI also DNA and Dakota the corner more than 14 million federal power data and false ones of national can be creation of massive biometry databases. Compounded growth that started run part of the pressure to use to create biometric profiles in the Shire population. The lead is running surpass class struggle. And auto-arrest sampling creates a collateral center for police to override the populated databases that exacerbates police violence against already overrealized black and brown folks. Trigger 15. The routes of databases would operate collateral for other policy goals. Active database could potentially police abuse, aggression, to racial inequality, flaws, authorized data collection, and auto-arrest offer collateral benefits. You want to custody and arrest carries with potential solved cohesive to offender incentives. They can arrest them suspect more attractive than other reasons. Another guilt collateral centers have been researched to the pull arrestees of the racial lens. And DNA information exposed to other sectors of life affects social opportunities. Available information and lack of coded regulation exposed to all population to function create data breaches. Back with 20. DNA can be used to police station, workplaces, benefit agencies, university, health insurance providers, regulation with the tools they use to track and control the movement of DNA testing of information, gender relationship, information, race, health, behaviors, even sexual orientation, but it obligates the DNA or expanding every data profiles of certain codes, can't use the work for police technological advances, they need more information to mine little oversight and transparency, increase the likelihood of function creep. The personal information stored database subject to recent report, identified most vulnerability to the community networks of federal agencies that hold personal data. So the 2015 OPM results in disclosure of data more than 20 million points. Using data profiles to credits face greater privacy risks from unauthorized access. And data breaches enable the zealoters that desire pathogens that target certain populations, specifically during COVID-19. Minor representation code heightens the risk of racialized bioweapons. So Vital 20. The from biological weapons rivaling creates a germ advances that biology acts as information CRISPR allows sense and bond with each percentage disease can be entered as well as generate agent pathogens and limit resistant COVID-19 and structured disease trading with guilt damage can be caused by a pathogen. Pathogens can be more difficult to detect and treat because cause more damage than pathogens can be entered to individual decision as more information available accuracy prediction will improve and accuracy can develop a bioweapon that reduces disease and removes detection. Only people with certain errors. Large genetic database allows the immune sequences to be predicted. This information can be used by bioweapons. And retention of DNA samples allows the sequencing of entire genomes that raises the stakes of function creep. Only sample which cells don't send 9. A DNA sample part of body entirely pods sequence all of the individual entire genome from sample use, which is sample but subsequent use of data are being selected really regulated in social database. So many conduct research that they can find a common thing that characterizes a criminal. The most effectively learning research on DNA destroy samples, especially limit function creep information in databases, limit the information they contain. And function creep promotes a pre-crime future whole populations are criminalized for birth for supposed gender risk. That creates a self-fulfilling prophecy where certain individuals are pre-scripted into criminality. Thomas 14. Code says that you are lots makers for data allows to manipulate trends in the data for research connected to certain genetic characteristics of certain type of offender. Use that information to assess other professional offenders to be no-brainer. Authorities that make phenotype crime statements like a hamster are identified for perpetrators by physical characteristics, likely so because we like track big indicators like a person that's danger building blocks or minority rights, cellular general facts. Use the data to nudge people to pair hangers to the wrong missions or bending pre-graph future replace general analysis could focus surveillance efforts so the humorous committing a felony affects social identity person misuse deliberately. And DNA analysis phenotype subset populations all racialized lines heightens discrimination stigma and racial profiling much on graduate 20. DNA phenotype external to visible physical features and through analysis of biological materials saturated trends by cluster group people characteristics and studying the subset population such interpretation leads to miscarriages just to reflect that DNA for racial minority for the confines of discriminating practice against vulnerable girls reading existing standardization creating for racial public exactly binary colonization of minorities. And changing auto-arrest sampling sample retention is key to reducing violent accesses and quotas. Only federal action forces take compliance the state and the database. Gold side 20. The phrase of collecting data samples individual arrested to be amended, regulate data samples and violent individual face issues or committed the federal statute should allow data to be taken from someone who merely used crime and states with the federal language have access to the federal database. If a state is out of compliance, it does not get access to federal criminal as much as statute that deletes data sample but effectively and electronically. Once accused is eaten innocent. Automatic destruction what's happened in the federal system, the federal government states the baseline for states to follow. And thus, the United States federal government should enact substantial criminal justice reform in the area of forensic science, prohibiting the collection of DNA samples from individuals in the United States who are neither facing charges nor have been convicted of a crime at trial, prohibiting the creation of DNA profiles of individuals in the United States who have not been convicted of a crime at trial. non-deletion of DNA samples and profiles when charges to arrest or dropped and arrestee is acquitted, require the immediate deletion of DNA samples after a DNA profile is created. And please use on-arrest DNA sampling to crush social movements and to technology process busting that splinters resistance. Card 20. A full profile could be tested from the inside of the face back. Please seal your DNA when protesters are treat the property is right for law enforcement. Personal information can hold on to a law for a long time. There's a good chance if you join a protest, you'll leave some personal information behind. Information please can harvest and valuable when investigate crimes or protest the data. Law enforcement class is actionable if the department feeds it into predictive policing programs used towards future investigation. Please may use protest to add people to databases. Data is really sticking around North Dakota officials arrested and standing around protesters from 3 years earlier based on data collected. They matches DNA from their database to DNA extracted from a cigarette he left in the state until about protesters can go from city to state federal agencies. And the perceived objectivity DNA sites provides the causal state assigned to recover from violence. To ask deconstruction of the epic surrounding DNA is crucial about our transformation. Aerosol code 9. The reciprocal DNA sites carries the risk of the abolition of DNA evidence and double to the arbus of certainty advocates claim using it can easily be against the abolition of logic by increasing the certainty that the perception that those being executed are worthy of execution. Such arguments strengthen the episode with certainty. DNA profiling emerged at academic sites rather than the police law. There was a large pool of witnesses who had said that half prosecution actual method of DNA evidence is subject to error, bias, and corruption. And contention to his framing. Extinction first logic makes decision making impossible. Month 15. Existential risk strikes me as shallow. Argument seems to run over considers a number of work that might mitigate these unlikely research abandon them all and we threat them so then this action is meaningless. The argument is likely that research will be wasted and cost has to attach using better proven strategies and then is worth any consideration a line of mass mistakes. And chains of potentialities overestimate probabilities. Disadvantages are pure propaganda to protect the status quo. Pilately Polarity 94. We lead to statistics behind unthermal and perfect economics. I should a plausible story can lead us to hold events that just before you consider totally improbable. Sequence of events has effective reasoning probability. Even the probability versus like the fact is soon forgotten. Probably the last link is obtained by combining the probabilities of each link and the change. The change is always less probable, least probable link. And threat construction, distraction, structural violence will increasing the propensity for conflict. Michael 9. The defining problems by using constructional patterns formulated security politicians and proud that's essential rather than public support government use security to enhance control. Fear and decrease depends on the state control. Security is not for free provided but in exchange to increase control. The state's strategy for explaining is increasing essential threats. Whoever tries to harm the state is translated to extra threat. What problems are dealt with in military problems, failure just gets problems by using normal systems to take the threat as existential. Like if we do not, everything else will be irrelevant. Means for defining existential because sort of cause legions to tackle threat in a violent manner. Do you want me to read anything else, Ian?
No, we're good.
Cool. I'm good for cross-text whenever you are.
Cool. What is function creep?
Yeah, function creep is the spread of the use of DNA for purposes beyond determining whether or not somebody is guilty, i.e. this looks like leaking that DNA evidence to other places like universities or health agencies, which is then used to die people based off things like pre-existing conditions. There's another part I can.
That makes sense. If DNA information collected during the criminal justice system like spills over into other areas, why doesn't like DNA information collected in non-CGR things like 23andMe spill back into criminal justice via function creep?
I don't think that's exactly how it works. The argument is that CODIS uniquely allows for these things because the security things on those genomes being sampled, i.e. the other part of function I was getting to earlier, is that those DNA collection, that DNA evidence being collected in a central location allows those to be sequenced to find.
Okay.
Also, there's like other answers to private like databases.
Yeah, sure. Who does the app?
The United States federal government.
Care to specify an agent?
No.
Cool. The plan text says the deletion of samples after the profile is created. Do you keep the DNA profile?
We keep certain DNA profiles, but all samples are deleted.
Okay, why do you keep certain DNA profiles?
Because profiles cannot be sequenced to lead to a function creep the same way that samples are the only ones that can be sequenced to find more information from a genome.
Okay.
The question of why the app didn't do something is silly. We've defended certain things we think are good.
Okay, what is the distinction between a profile and a sample?
The profile contains information that was like already drawn from the DNA sample, like certain loci from within the DNA, and a DNA sample is like the physical thing that like they like took to get your DNA, like a cheek swab.
Okay, sure. So explain to me the process for how DNA samples get sequenced.
I'm not exactly sure how sequencing happens, but I know it like results from the cheek swab.
Okay, sure. So like you swab the DNA and the information in the DNA tells you like how to sequence it. I'm wondering why you can't, I guess, sequence something with essential loci that are sort of gleaned from the profiling process.
I mean, we can read more evidence later. Profiles cannot be sequenced because the loci don't contain all the same information, i.e. they're just like certain like markers on your DNA. It's not like your entire genome.
The way sequencing works is there's things like rapid DNA machines that you put the sample in and it runs it through a bunch of different simulations to try to figure out info from that, which means that not having the sample means you can't do that part, which we think is bad.
Okay, that's fine. The loci are enough to like glean guilt or innocence?
No, our whole argument is that DNA is like bad and often corrupt, subject to bias.
Okay. Does DNA collection still happen post-app?
In certain instances, it could.
But you said it's all bad.
Well, we think that we prohibited the collection of DNA samples from anybody who's not facing charges or has been convicted of a crime at trial. So I'm not sure like who else.
We've identified specific parts of DNA that the app tries to solve, like on-arrest sampling. We don't have to say that we solve all of DNA.
That seems like a lot of gymnastics to keep DNA, but.
Okay. The 1 and C should be sent. It's 5 off the advantage framing. Is my volume good and can everyone hear me okay? Awesome. Is anyone not ready?
Yeah, what was the order?
Oh, sorry, 5 off advantage framing.
Give me a second to download it as well. Okay, I'm good.
All right. Is anyone not ready? Great. First off, forensic science reform requires improving techniques to confirm guilt or innocence. Code 14, forensic science reform in this has become crucially important to the reform process. Forensic science reform resource techniques of not validated procedures for minimizing confirmation violation. They reform collection of data for people who have already been determined to be innocent. That's a voter. For limits on negatable absent grounds, they justify anti-criminal justice acts that change procedures for everyday people, like reparations or wrongful convictions, and infinite tweaks to DNA collection, like DNA can only be collected for people associated with white supremacist groups or people who have been involved in civil domestic disputes, which kills ground because NIC decide links are based on reform to the way the criminals are treated. If they say we meet, we're policing, vote NIC on extra tier presumption because they can't change DNA databases and not specifying a branch of the USFG before the 1 and C is a voter. For predictability and NIC ground allows them to spike out of age encounter plans and decides. Next off is the abolition K. The F is a superficial tweak to the criminal justice system that preserves its legitimacy and co-opts the movement towards structural change. Karkonoski's 19. CJR superficial and deceptively, the US is the greatest incarcerator in the world, making just enough to use service actors to see legitimacy reform because are co-opting a movement towards profound change. They focus a couple of conversation on the marches of the car without confronting the structural issues. It is our few ideas cause more harm in a criminal justice system than neutral rule of law. Our criminal laws reflect power discourses and just people must discourses as interested in changing the punishment bureaucracy around every proposed reform in this movement's vision. And to challenge white supremacy and create real transformation, we must start from the position that the system cannot work just as it was designed to, that it can't be reformed in order to create meaningful transformation. CABA 17. The system is a broken, the system is a result of favor white supremacy is maintained and reproduced as a criminal apparatus. This doesn't change with them, but it's currently happening as part of a continue him and others up in the ongoing US white supremacist nation building process. They call police themselves in the strategy, demobilizes action and subset activist energy. Right now, we need to make a sense of arguments against the entire system. The liberal consensus has been enabling exploitation and oppression. The same apparatus quickly telling people to join for national unity. Starting point is the idea that the system isn't actually broken. If somebody has had to imagine prisons and police in order to create them, prisons are new invention. And the alternative is abolitionist pedagogy that builds critiques and movements against state violence by countering hegemonic rhetorical frames. Lloyd 11. Invisibility, state violence is the imagination of imperative institutions reproduce relations of hierarchy and domination that contribute to family separation, community fragmentation, labor exploitation, and premature death. Building movements against state violence means confronting hegemonic frames that understand state violence is exceptional. The prison is most overlooked sites of state violence. Attention should be placed on challenging the prison regime on an abolitionist pedagogy that works against the normalized state violence they reproduce. Prison abolition has an extensive anti-violence imperative imagination, challenge regardless suppression of human freedoms, and offer important visions of forging links among different sectors of anti-violence, organizing, building economies and community institutions that foster creativity, self-determination, and mutual responsibility among the abolitionist visions guide current action for making good communities. They create real safety and meet people's needs. Abolition offers imperative theoretical vision and practical means for building non-killing futures. Next off is the pick. The United States federal government should 1. Fund sexual assault kit testing by dedicating no less than $100 million per year to state and local law enforcement for the express purpose of testing sexual assault kits, and condition that funding on the following mandates. Kits be logged and tracked. Kits will only be tested with the explicit consent of the victim, and backlogs must be eliminated. 2. Prosecute on the basis of these kits. 3. Prohibit the collection of DNA samples from individuals in the United States who are neither facing charges nor have been convicted of a crime at trial, and prohibit the creation of DNA profiles of individuals in the United States until they have convicted of a crime at trial, with the exception of DNA samples collected from rape kits. And 4. Require the automatic deletion of DNA samples and profiles on charges against an arrestee or dropped, or an arrestee is acquitted, and require the immediate deletion of DNA samples after a DNA profile is created. And the counterplan solved by correcting status quo in action on sexual assault, leaving the kids untested is an injustice to survivors. Do 19. Just houses the untested testing every individual's culpability, finding what helps states eliminate this inaction is secretly dismissive of the victim. Law enforcement is missing a major opportunity to identify perpetrators. Access to the fund states would have to agree to share data. Federal commitment would do wonders rape isn't taking seriously. Next off, the National Governors Association should inform the federal government that state cooperation with federal initiatives, including relevant criminal justice policies, will be contingent upon the United States prohibiting the collection of DNA samples from individuals in the United States who are neither facing charges nor have been convicted of a crime at trial, prohibiting the creation of DNA profiles of individuals in the United States who have not been convicted of a crime at trial, requiring the automatic deletion of DNA samples and protests and profiles when charges against an arrestee or are dropped or an arrestee is acquitted, and requiring the immediate deletion of DNA samples after a DNA profile is created. And states can leverage the federal government into adopting reforms in the criminal justice context. Gardner 19. States have a constitutional right to say for federal regulatory activity. The Kennedy Committee rules increasingly relevant criminal law serves as the legal basis for state resistance to federal criminal enforcement initiatives that hold federal government resources critical to enforcement. The Fed cannot broadly enforce criminal initiatives absent cooperation from state and local police enforcement. Nullification is likely outcome of their governments to follow suit. The momentum builds towards a federal decriminalization movement. Crime policy abolition is a probable result of clear states prohibition failure in conjunction with prohibitions repealed demonstrates the final stage, and successfully using uncooperative federalism leads to solutions to warming. Galbraith 17. States and climate change mitigation measures require sweeping emissions reductions to have rollback climate change mitigation scholarship offers and sites how states can influence and resist federal policy differences between cooperative and cooperative federally interactive nature, whereas state governments with ways to influence federal policy. State governments can engage in uncooperative federalism, including by resisting federal policy. State governments can help shape federal policy with regard to climate. The more the state governments enhance efforts to mitigate climate change, the more the U.S. does with respect to addressing this global problem. And extinction. 19. Climate change causing global extinction not only reality cascading effects also defeat by multiple factors, critical thresholds and tipping points of rapidity, collapse, like ocean surface absorption of sunlight, forest areas, release of carbon, release of methane, runaway global warming. Scientific consensus, the adaptability limit to climate change due to heat stress, even modest warming could expose large fractions of the population, making extinction more likely. There's a 95% probability likelihood of 4 degrees Celsius extinction in the whole world. It's more important to avoid by literally a trillion times. Next off, Biden's stimulus bill is set to pass next week. Starts as a boost to the economy. Zebos right at 126. Denzer agency session to combat the pandemic. Kickstart the process. The Republican support for Biden's $1.9 trillion appears to allow Dems to pass only 51 votes. Time of the yes and reconciliation would require every Dem to get behind the Biden rescue plan. The crisis for swift action. Durbin said we're facing a national emergency with COVID-19 in the economy. We got to move quickly. And CHR requires Biden lobbying that consumes finite PC, cannibalizing stimulus negotiations. Hammett 112. Biden said he will see police reforms that uncapital punishment only can and build reforms that the Congress has accepted to start making it hard to deliver on announced CHR to accomplish or he will need good partnerships with Congress. Biden, one of the most progressive CHR platform permitting candidate in years. Biden faces constraints. Government moves slowly. Time and PC are limited. His administration will need to prioritize the pandemic and economic fallout. And new stimulus bill halts slow growth and prevents economic crisis. Law 126. Biden stimulus package could boost the U.S. economic appetite 5% of the next year. Chief economist thinking the IMF that measures could add 1.25% to the U.S. growth in 2021 economy will extend by 5.1% in 2020, 2.5% in 2022, cumulative 5% increase over 3 years a year. In an emergency situation, there should be targeted support to struggling households. COVID has killed more than 420,000 Americans, some millions out of work, and is infecting more than 173,000 people per day. And diversionary war, Howell 13. Economic crisis trigger and state initiation using a sample over 185 years can be generalizable to diversionary war. Resist strategic and avoidance increases diversionary war states to behave according to the expectations of diversion. The effect is significant and robust relationship 20% increase in initiated crises trigger shift into losses from engage in riskier behavior. The advantage. 1/10 of all causes to law enforcement surveillance, infant hospital screenings, ancestry devices, and shed DNA all end up in federal databases. We read Green 1AC, Whitehead 19. The hospital taken no about DNA without parents, all those just times that the government stated origin of DNA of new words in many states. DNA is stored indefinitely. Corporate America access familial DNA with ancestry and 23 million collection of shed touch DNA. Jam central resources allow you to trace your family tree, can also be used against you. Legislative actors focus on police and legally collect the suspect DNA, whether upon arrest or conviction. The question of how to handle shed DNA has largely so true. You already made a file somewhere, albeit without a name. And DNA profiles stock combined samples, partial profiles, error rates, and overestimated success. Essler 17. DNA profiles not clean enough to identify an individual. Ideally, sample would take at least examine 16 different markers. DNA damage, although the moisture and temperature social worker match up with many more people, even full profiles match with a person other than the culprit. Mark the card at the culprit and turns DNA phenotyping and function creeps their base off profile as show in Sankar 4. Analysis of SERs have not been used to read tests with the assumption that SERs associated with usually identifiable physical characteristics will be predictive. However, the SER logic is in the status of 10,000 profiles of simulate the fluidity of racial categories should be acknowledged. Mark the card at acknowledge framing. Saving the greatest number of lives should be your first ethical priority. Kaminsky 96. Saving 2% cannot away killing when this is unjustified ideological constraints, even if you do not away choose resources. I have good reason to save as many as I can, and counterplans, albeit their framing, they can't falsify our intention. So it proves we're focused on solving discrimination better. Insolvency deficits filter probability. You should hold the app responsible for solving violence from CJS and extinction first. Existential risk require unique risk calculus postrum 13. Extinction risks are underestimated. Mitigation may be more hard over alleviation of presence suffering a human life as a human life feature generations that are in proportion to their numbers. Existential risk mitigation has a much higher utility. Mark the card at utility. Is anyone going to need a marked copy of any of those cards before cross?
I think we're good, but
Awesome.
are you good?
Wait, one question. Did you read the Cho and Senker card on the advantage?
I did, but I marked it at category should be acknowledged.
Okay, cool.
Okay, you good for cross 6 now?
Yes.
Okay. Status of the off.
Conditional.
Can you kick parts of the counterplan?
No, we won't kick lines.
It's like
Okay. T, how to determine based off the plan text if it improves techniques?
Sure. So it's not about improving techniques. That's not the part that's the violation. The part of the plan that's the violation is the deletion of samples for people that are determined to be innocent.
Well,
we
your
think that
insert
forensic
card
science
is tagged as requires improving techniques to confirm guilt or innocence.
Yeah, so we're saying that after that part of the plan happens after guilt or innocence is confirmed, so it's not part of forensic reform.
Okay, abolition. Can the alt ever result in the AF?
We won't say like the alternative like expressly results in like the AF, or we won't fiat it or whatever, if that's your question.
So can it result in the AF?
We think that like abolition as a framework could result in like the stopping of DNA like being used for the criminal justice system, but we won't like fiat it or claim.
Is that a no? It won't result in the AF?
Not like the plan text. It could result in like the end of using DNA for like criminal justice purposes.
Is an abolitionist pedagogy just like education, or what are material actions that alt would endorse?
Sure. So like it endorses sort of abolitionist movements going on outside of this debate round, but it's also recognition that the sort of like rhetoric and framing of the criminal justice system used inside this debate round is an important way to sort of build counter-hegemonic
Is the link to the AF just that it's a reform? So the honest card.
No, it's also sort of the way that you've framed like the criminal justice system, i.e. like DNA collection is only sort of problematic when it's being used against people who are determined to be innocent, stuff like that.
Okay, the Kava card, how is the alternative challenged white supremacy?
Sure. The Lloyd card or the Kava card?
The Kava card, the second one.
Yeah. Basically, any challenge to the criminal justice system is a challenge to white supremacy because we think that the criminal justice system is built upon logics of white supremacy that sort of seek to maintain sort of stereotypes of white innocence.
Okay,
and
the NGA counterplan.
criminality.
The NGA counterplan. The Galbraith card, why is uncooperative federalism key?
Basically, the Galbraith card says that states need to sort of use their own innovation measures in order to also be able to resist
but
like
why
that
are
federal
those
policy.
state innovation measures key as opposed to the federal government?
The Galbraith card says, like, quote unquote, the more that state governments enhance or reduce federal efforts to mitigate climate change, the more or less the U.S. does with respect to addressing this global problem.
Okay,
basically,
it's
saying that like the states.
What are the net benefits to the counterplans?
I think that NGA, is stimulus a net benefit to NGA, Shruti?
No, they're both internal.
Okay, yeah, they're both internal.
Okay, cool. The Galbraith card is talking about why we need to resist Trump. Obviously, Trump is no longer in office. Why is state like uncooperative federalism still key?
Yeah, Biden also has done a bunch of like really bad stuff. He just like gave a bunch of warrants for people to do a bunch of oil drilling stuff. So.
Okay. 8 minutes start. Stop prep 7:24. I'll send it out. While I'm sending it, the order is going to be the advantage, framing, the T argument, the NGACP, the sexual assault pick, The abolition K. And the descent. Greenhill, let me know when y'all have received it.
Can you mute yourself on our call, Ian?
Yeah, I did.
I got it. 1 second to download. Okay, I'm good.
Is anyone not good? Awesome. I'm going to start in about 10 seconds if no one stops me. Current DNA produces culture, lawful conviction, surveillance, migrants, who design patterns, and function, minority criminalization. The absolves by reducing those DNA produces. One, the white hacker, we don't be responsible for all of our clauses. The third, it's hyper-specific to white DNA, specifically sent by the law enforcement is bad. Second, we make it so the cops can't take honor as simply means that they don't get to take the info anymore, which means they can't solve. Third, all of our cards are specific to white. Code specifically causes the leaks, i.e. inclusive, it has worse security, which means that these other databases don't solve. Cops won't get it from those databases because those databases have created agreements that they won't share with cops. Second, the Essler thing, yes, we agree. There's no reason why this is often exists because we wouldn't increase the amount of profiles that use. We would still reduce net both the number of them. Also, cross-apply the errands and cold card that we would reduce the net amount that is used in trials at large. Doesn't mean that they don't have any external impact of the churn sinker stuff. Framing. Evaluating probably dominated to reducing present suffering is the only ethical option, and anything else is bargaining lives for uncertainty, which is eugenic logic. It justifies atrocities if the quote-unquote ends are good. That's bad. DAs start from 0% risk. Don't presume they're true. You should make them prove it. The Kaminsky card, this is ridiculous. Extinction first logic fails. Contradiction that both extinction would make decision-making impossible. That's month. But we've also already invented the theory of util. Their linear risk and contract, each only exponentially reduces the risk. They don't account for neutral outcomes. They're relying on bias. It's implausible. That's the counterplan stuff. Well, answer the counterplans and stuff, but you should be inherently skeptical if they don't solve the entirety of the app, which they won't. The Bostrom cards answered about the DAs are to push response to the backbone of self-security, which propagates depression, makes the impacts inevitable because they overreact to everything. That's Michael's T. We meet planters in a vacuum, and we meet with quote minimize bias. That's Cole 14. We read yellow. For instance, the reform include oversight the positive value of evidence that operates from minimizing bias. The Struden card says that DNA is a bias technology, means we make counterintuitive. For this applies to the entire system, not just post charges. With experience sensing purposes on the application of scientific languages and criminal justice is the institutions involved in prosecution, not just post conviction. That's 75 criminal justice are the institutions people when they really crime and criminals. Forensic science is the application of science for solving crimes. Includes DNA. That's Collins 18. For science is broader forensic science for application of science for solving crimes. Examples are DNA. Prefer one intended to find. They have highlighted out of context. It's strung together sentences. It doesn't actually define reform. Just says that reformers could quote include this movement, which means that we should be still topical. Second, over limiting. They would exclude all acts that involve policing with forensic science. Since policing is not post-conviction, excludes a third of the topic, which is obviously ridiculous. Fourth, the third app innovation. It's key to developing new forensic science things. They mix burns because they are about improving techniques, which is a question of solvency, not the plan. Makes it impossible to debate. Expertise, not a voter. Their ground so applies, gives them extra ground. Functional limits, check limited solvency, have circumvention and politics and process. CPUs reasonability, competing against preservation of the bottom end. Substance, credit, good is good enough. A-spec, no burn to specify. They would exclude whole res apps. Also, the negs aren't entitled to ground. They can research it. It's not really work. Government actions encompass multiple branches. The ground they lose to agency because those are bad for clash of app content research anyway. The NGACP. Perm do both. Shields link Perm do both. Shields link to politics because it's easy to pass duties and cooperative Fed solves. That's Simmons 11. Expanding federal rules. I mean, states federal work cooperative Fed regimes that was in neighbor surroundings and may shield really amounts of development for legal experimentation. Perm do the counterplan. It's justified because it results in the app happening. Perm do the app and have the National Governors Association bargain over another criminal justice policy. Justified because their solvency advocates not about the app, which solves the internal net benefit. Their solvency. If it's one is delay, federal follow one takes at least months. Leave second focus device. Second, the federal follow one that's garner 18 against the government and federal government and criminal was not trust obligation. Federal to abstain from enforcement will not later the abolition of abolition and review or notification of government quash robust conditioning funding or prohibition. Third is backlash. Biden will perceive it as state overreach, so he'll quash state efforts in other areas, which kills the net benefit. Fourth, NGA threat fails. That's Miller 15 NGA has only lose because of the battle of organization globalization governance for NGA subliminal bureaucracy of disputes. Default 0.9 so send by president college policy of Texas, a pull followed by Louisiana, Florida, and others. State action on warming inevitable and fails. That's Livermore 17 California bills themselves later to curb climate change whether been from the federal fear of states will follow given power of the states will less and more discipline rules on information. People lose more obligation to abolition and down as lots of pass away banning or release so much they fed us and shifting and state will create a policy back in the solar which from Paris without a from federal expense likely no epidemic causes to warming. That's Johnny 15. If you throw the temperatures are made appear to be usual as Mr. Gilder carefully improvements every capacity to economic development and human capital even if nation meets emissions targets level effect on the light of emissions from India. Uniform physics if you have to vote no one can choose two actors which teach kills the station making with education but we have forced it on the margins for fed key once it's not real world either the pick. permutation, do both, that solves, and perm do the app and all the exclusive parts of the counter plan, which still solves the signal of increasing funding for sexual assault stuff. It's not a pick out of anything. The app says DNA can be used in convictions, means it's possible to use it for sexual assault cases. We should say like on arrest and the sampling thing. There's a prosecution DNA incentivizes prosecutors to file false sexual assault charges so they can get people's DNA anyway. Their backlogs, the funding doesn't solve backlogs. That's Chapter 19. The GD traders survival of DNA samples that is fine for all family cases of negative purpose and only values and shield because of the demand for DNA analysis and they should not be able to kill about. There's an objectivity DNA cross apply the Aronson and Cole card that they simply re-legitimize the idea of DNA samples because it spills over to be used in other areas, i.e. they'll carve out extra exceptions there. The sexual assault underreporting is an all cause that's kill 80% sexual assault is worried about fear of invasion, distortion of allegations, not being believed, and high risk of false messages. Murphy 15. Arizona advanced so 40 and people in yet of 20 Burgos as police is brought to found willing to request based on DNA match alone kids fairly country based on only non-locus match just like a proof of guilt. Mark the card at proof of guilt. There's DNA is irrelevant in most sexual assault cases because victims usually know they're assaulted. It's a question of consent. That's Hamden 19. DNA is less of an importance of issue is whether a condom was consensual or firmly the majority of cases between people who know each other. Condos are voted 1. We circle of generics, which is very prep and argumentation. 2. Clash of shall be on these covered floor articles they get dis for the abolition K. Framework, we wear the results of the plan against links. They only get links to the plan. That comes before prior questions. It's the only predictable locus point. That's key 1. Fairness. Anything else moots the 1AC offensive restarts the debate in the 1AC, which modifies the neg prep. 2nd, clash debating consequences for saying there's disprove the thesis of the app. Anything else is anti-educational. They perfcom because the pick says that we should still keep around parts of the criminal justice system. Means we get to kick our reps. Perm do both. That's character 19. Character 20 is killing where lower schemes laws just to fight the law standard abolish abortion reforms which focuses on over reducing the penal system as causal already even this is worse than criminal. A criminal work is but a radical criminal is part of a strategy building power step by step criminals building more powerful but it's worth doing. Now the links, it's pretty ridiculous. The character on his card is about prisons and police, not the app. Means you have to read a forensic science reform to be means you have to read a card that's specifically about forensic science reform and before you give them a link, but only if it's a link of a mission or a link to the score. They haven't one of the reason the app does something bad, just a reason why the app doesn't go far enough, which means the perm definitely solves link turn reform, empowers protesters by giving them victories to point to, which proves that we're in the direction of abolition. Perm do the app in the mindset of abolition definitely solves because it's just a mindset alt. The alt itself doesn't really do anything. It's just pedagogy. Pedagogy doesn't change material conditions. All their cards are about how we got to change material conditions. Permutation do the alt probably includes the app. The alt fails because no public buying. That's link. After 17 of the call for the app, should be simple American left. Show for working models, achieved some markers. Second, surveillance D. Cops use DNA to shut down protests. Means the app say pure gazette. That's creature. Third, backlash D. Pro-prison people like white supremacists the military will crush the alt. Crossed by the objectivity D. It's the reason where pure gazette floating picks are a voter steals the app, which is unfair and kills clash. We get no explanations based on the 2 and C. The dissent doesn't pass this. Bear Lopez and everyone 24. By percentage to the White House stimulus prices going to high income, but don't need them many prices need to be more targeted. Collins said, top the number of concern Collins and mention. I cannot pass the Senate and guys can corruption the privacy, but not a link. They've got to read F that specific senators would flip because of the plan, which they haven't done yet. Forensic science passes in minute. That's fierce and 14. The Senate, the answer is the Senate system acts in a unanimous force with people's ready to proof for the amount of time they spent because the was only minutes. Mansion 1 seizure. That's mentioned 18. Mansion voted for herself. They have found this invisible as common sense reform. People is an important step towards make our justice system fairer. Mansion said, but the D is not intrinsic. A logical policymaker could just pass both. The economy's fine now. The stimulus overheats. That's peak 129. There's no reason for Handers no logic amounts in the time the economy is methods and everybody should continue their goalie. Beginning the labor market has been exceeding your labor dollars hospitality. $500,000,000 will economy is related to the result of policy that shut down business not a slump in demand. I think will 4% in the fourth quarter. The MOE outside the Atlanta Fed first model had what service and housing is because new homes manufacturers all leading the city the workers. They are the fastest growth in 2018 on average. The consumers in good shape with spending was up 4% over the year. Outside of where storm features have been hands, also by 1 trillion excess saving, but don't have a demand problem. Cause inflation spurs more recession, which turns the impact. That's Shatsko 21. Grant the worst opportunity bubble Biden's or local relative imperialist sites followed by crash extra money and a putting trips in the game. Hospital your birthday shows that exploited following the checks of will end up being on the sexy versus the collapse roll 29. Grant them rejects the theory that I feel rulers are pretty with the side of Biden nearly what sheets here so you don't have a lot in the bank. Mark the card a lot in the bank. Go back to the pick. Picks are bad, steals the app, makes it impossible to ever makes it impossible for the app to ever compete. And also kills Clash because they can choose any random part of the app. They can steal any part of the app, make the beta valid, which kills Clash in education. It's a bit of fairness too. I'm good for CS.
Awesome. You good?
Yeah.
All right. Reasons to reject the team?
Yes. Floating picks, condo, picks, 50 fiat.
Okay. The prosecutors decide on the pick. I guess like how can they prosecute for other like sort of crimes like using DNA when DNA collection for all of those other crimes have been like abolished in the first place?
Our argument is that prosecutors can twist things to file certain sexual assault claims so they can get people's DNA because that's the only avenue you can use to get DNA from cases. Means that they'll file extra cases for random things so they can get DNA.
Okay, like, do you have any evidence that they'll be successful in that, or like, can you give me an example of where
Yeah,
this
the
is
student
empirically
card,
good?
for example, talks about how prosecutors sometimes will bribe labs and forensic labs to try to get them to produce false results. So we can read another card on the 1AR in this, but it means that prosecutors have in the past had a vested incentive in doing this. Also, cops do it.
Okay, yeah, I don't think that that's really like in
Oh,
the.
you're wrong. So I can read another card for it. I can also show you the line in student where it says it if you want.
Okay, that's okay. The NGA counterplan, the permitted the app and have the National Governors Association bargain over another criminal justice policy. What like is the other criminal justice policy? Do you have any evidence for what
I don't
area that would
know.
be in?
The evidence that you've read in the 1AC is not about the AF, which means that the counterplan text that the evidence represents could be any policy.
Okay, topicality. This wood card says that it involves forensic science covers professions involved in the application of sciences to the criminal justice system. I guess like what part of this is redefined saying that like post-conviction is like part of the criminal justice system?
One, we've read other cards about what that means, i.e. The Shinner card talks about how it's not just about the post-conviction era of that, but it's also about forensic science is a field that spans multiple processes, i.e. you do forensic science like police taking DNA is a form of forensic science. Obviously, that's not a post-conviction thing that occurs.
Yeah.
But it's still a part of forensic science.
Okay, yeah, maybe I should be clear. So, like, I guess, does the affirmative forensics, sorry, is the affirmative a reform on like whether or not people are determined to be found guilty or innocent? And then after someone is
the
found
AF
innocent,
reforms
does
the process
reform
of
that
forensic
DNA?
science. Like, I think I've been very clear. The AF reforms the
Okay,
field
sorry,
of
I just
DNA
want to
forensic
ask, like,
science.
after somebody has been found innocent, is their DNA sample deleted in the world of the AF?
In the world of the AF, so yeah, in the world of the AF,
Yes, we delete
when someone
all
is, we delete all samples that
Okay,
are
so you
taken.
delete the sample of somebody that is no longer involved in the criminal
No,
justice.
these samples are taken by police, which means that it's a part of policing. We delete those samples. It's also, forensic science is not just post-conviction. This is a ridiculous argument because you would exclude all AFs that involve policing because police don't just deal with people who've already been sentenced.
Okay, thank you.
8 minutes starting now. prep 513. And are there cards? Oh yeah, there are cards. I'll send them out. Oh. Actually, hold on, 513. I'll take a little bit more prep. Stop prep 452. Now I'll send it out. Okay. The order is the K politics NGA case. My Word doc obscures the Zoom window, so when people are ready, can I get verbal confirmation?
Get the order again.
K NGA politics case.
I'm good.
Okay, if nobody says anything, I'm just gonna go. Cool. The K outweighs the case now more than ever. There are rampant modern day examples of police brutality and blatant discrimination within the criminal justice system, shown by this from Ahmaud Arbery, Breonna Taylor, George Floyd, and the shooting of Jacob. Clearly, reforms have failed and continued and expanded policing, whereas abolitionism works to chip away and reduce the overall impact of like DNA and the rest of the criminal justice system. Are intervention is necessary in adopting an abolitionist pedagogy that builds movements against state violence is key to combating these hegemonic rhetorical frames. Only the K and the K alone solves framework. We meet an argument is that the reform presented by the 1AC is literally bad counter-interpretation of the role of the negatives to disprove the desirability of the affirmative, and we get links to epistemologically and rhetoric because it's the core of CGR and the intricate aspect of how policies get out. For an example, when Congress people call for defunding the police, it can mean anything from literally limiting the police to simply decreasing their budgets or the presence in schools. The logic behind the policy matters a ton to its implementation. We can have alternatives that can be based on links because tons of counterplans can be placed on net benefits, and it's important for the reasons above. All of our arguments will be rooted in topic literature, resolvable the predictability limits. Offense reform versus abolition is the debate literally playing out in the streets in Congress now. All rhetoric matters cards will be on the perm. They say per con non-negation theory means that the role of the negative is to disprove the desirability of the act through any means necessary. It's not reciprocal. That justifies, or it's not reciprocal. That justifies like app conditionality, which is bad for fairness in class because it allows the apps to shift their advocacies and like spec out of links. The perm. It doesn't make sense. The debate is a question of whether the app's reform is good or bad. All the links prove it's bad. The perm is relevant. If the alt solves the app, which it does, rhetoric confirming matter. This debate isn't just about the links for reform versus abolition. It's about the frame that reform locks us into, which the perm links to about 2020. The term reform is only expected by the ability of people who are jailed reform, see the reinforce the existence of the narrative people going through that not only goes without policy minor rather than fundamental reforms. The people who are imprisoned for not violent commission prisons and continuations like every extension was everyone in prisons, black ops, rapid failure, imaginations, whether person plates or heads and hearts. Let's imagine study of violence, rather than more violence, with disposable people call them into accountability relationship with rhetorical frames, make the app and all mutually exclusive. Abolition for me is key lasting social change, but the all gets watered down or compromised with the rhetoric of reform. They don't get to separate rhetoric of the plan. Separate 2005. And a percentage of whatever regulated social media central list has been language talk about it. Person 1998% of comments with the Republican. The rubric of the PSC versus organizational the refused to believe that teaching and control people makes separate reject negative poses in social context of debate, social exclusion, poverty, message, addiction, government, and neglect the shift several ways of the polity of great security to creating city of resources of completion. The revolution is the creative of person district. Makes the world between the person, the evolution of city, abolition, the evolution of person, a lot of completion of the energy, liberation mark by the 13 of was regulated rather than ended slavery. The Carcassonne evidence. They don't build energy for movements. The app is doing some fancy gymnastics to be able to keep DNA collection and the DNA profile intact. The arguments on case about how those replace DNA samples means the app doesn't solve what it claims to, which means it's not a step in the right direction. It links to the counter reform stuff. The Carcassonne describes. I'll do the link debate here that said the link was only to policing, but there are two links to DNA. First is innocence. DNA activist reform is antithetical to the larger abolitionist product due to its creation and protection of the innocent, vulnerable subject. The state maintains its power by pitting different oppressed groups against each other, since it alone cannot contain the needs of all the people and suffer under its domain. The PIC is greatly misunderstood. People only think it's horrible because it captures innocent people, meaning it justifies the use of prison for those who are guilty. This politic reprice specific people as vulnerable and need for such exceptions. Second, as data postpone the DNA data still count for those who are convicted, meaning that those who commit crimes deserve to be state surveilled, and a world where criminals aren't worthy of being free of the criminal justice system. The alt is a move away from such a single punishment, which is why the app can't access the same things from the K. But more broadly, the app has chosen one small legal remedy and claimed it to end police violence. This is laughable at best and egregious, self-congratulatory white liberalism at worst. All of the links turn the case in that way because the plan will be used to justify other forms of police protection and say sanctioned violence. A huge portion of my speech will be the link to it, because even if we went one link, it means you go in because it nukes sovereignty, approves the smaller form, increases the scope of the power of the prison industrial complex. It's still the one and two link. Minor reforms are bad. The language reform is bureaucratic, lacks structural analysis. There are two levels to the link. The first is that reforms should have broader demands that literally have violent consequences. Small to medium size reforms, inside counter reforms. There are two examples. A, California ended cash bail, but as a result, a lot of extended pre-trial detention, which is bad itself, but even worse because it likely will expand various forms of incarceration. B, New York banned kids and adults from being in the same prison seems like a good idea, but they immediately constructed new kid prisons, and they even have the audacity to name one after Harriet Tubman because penal logic is so deeply embedded in politics. The second is that minor reforms make abolition impossible. A, reform discourse sets the bounds of what constitutes appropriate discussion of CGR, which pushes out abolitionist voices which are often minority and oppressed voices. B, policies like the AFR always try to concessions which confuses the public and is an ethical and logistical nightmare. C, reforms cool activist energy that is necessary for the movement to succeed. That energy exists now and has all summer, but it adds whenever minor reform is touted as a huge victory. Second, a huge victory. You should consider the burden of the app to win. You should consider the burden for the app to win the reforms can solve to be massive spirit on 2020. As far as the virtual book of the country, there's too many times players who are my fellow training between journalism and policy, demanding abolition system is doing exactly what it's done to public accommodation. We're radical look at the PDC representatives, please just got our from public because union contract reforms at the SB Victoria, but again, to be clean, dismantle reconstruction action policy, really the prosecutor officials responsible for the police skill and represent the reform for all with another reminder reforms of police was called with any my have the community policing and public awareness about abolition and for officers treating the police actually legal the police over the union, but offer the training Specifically, any of the all causes and circumvention arguments on case prove this. Like one legal change will simply bolster the usage of the other things that already exist. The impact of the continuation of the prison industrial complex is incalculable. Local and global violence whose very magnitude escapes proper linguistic description. Seagull 2018. Official result police use a daily force really by the annual number of non-justifiable homicide of police in the United States on a number of really just began to be counted by 2003 all reported by police was voluntary police murder was the only expectable police cost per restricted the technology system communications surveillance and armor vehicle standard shooting against other best station community profiling more reported police contributions to incarceration federal government marine cities deputy federal justice and technology engage creating new federal settings that level for police job bodies of honesty use of low doses precision the calculus police legally exponentially calculated precision to the public health units years of life minutes about police perfection just by all aspects of state market balance all together right domestic criminal justice and ensure the preservation of evil inequities institute of labor of the violence work that turns the case mass incarceration code disparate death or mere manifestations of larger anti-black phenomenon. Only the case addresses the root cause of the act, the purge of the act from the mindset that severs the rhetorical frame. That's bad. That was above the alt. I'll do the ultimate here. It's an abolition pedagogy that creates movements against state violence. New imagination centers on an abolitionist pedagogy that works against the taken for granted prisons and state violence that they normalize and reproduce prison abolition demands an end to other connected practices and empirical hegemonic rule. The alternative is an important to forge links among different sectors of anti-violence to derive a solution and create possibilities for freedom and flourishing. They said no material conditions. It doesn't have to be about material conditions. It's about whether you think an endorsement of the carceral state is an ethical orientation that strengthens the movements. It's built to questioning whether DNA evidence is necessary in the first place, which does solve the app. Frankly, the all we didn't say it would result in the app. It severs usage action, the rhetoric, and taking DNA profiles, etc. Severance is bad. That was above no public buy-in. Practical abolitionist alternatives are being created every day, voting negative. That aligns about with these emerging movements. Equals 20. We've mentioned somebody saying this moment that the people are fighting against spiritual violence, for the players are here in the interest of building a party, image abolition, proceeds, and the purpose of the police purpose also being made of passage, ultra power of tyranny, it's all independence, the capitalism, and it's Seattle's autonomous and just not just holding up police with their expanding the population of the political forms here, and managed way to burn social farm, handle stream, Scotty's invasion, include the separation, state possible version of the hands of the police, part of police, the police use DNA to shut down protesters and the backlash of the arguments that case prove they do already do that in the world of the ass, so it's not a net benefit to the firm, but the Siegel evidence above explains how abolitionist practice involves imaginative ways to prevent social harm in the face of crack on the objectivity. Just as their Aronson and Cole evidence is about death penalty abolitionists who buy into the idea of guilt and innocence and appeals to DNA. They emphasize that it only arrests bad guys aren't convincing when abolitionist ethics questions who those bad guys are. If the justification for the app is to call into question the objectivity of the practices that it bans, retaining the DNA profile proves an implicit belief that it works. The work on case proves that that's not true. The app retains the DNA profile for individuals not guilty. They buy into the rhetorical idealization of the objectivity of DNA. Aronson and Cole 9. The idea that DNA profiles here in the spirit of evidence of a lot of people suppose is just worth an idealizing image of DNA profiling no more than actual practice. And it's they say floating pigs bad, it's not a floating pig case. XSM 1 and C1 function creep goes the other way. That's 1C white had the government mandates genetic screening of newborns at birth, which is short and definitely should DNA isn't formally connected during the CGS process. The police cooperate with companies like 23andMe to gain access to your DNA. It doesn't matter if the police aren't using it. That's DNA collection that like turns all the function creep stuff because even if police aren't allowed to collect it, they're just given because the government mandates screening of newborns. So that stuff is kept there. XSIM 1 and C2, the app did so much gymnastics to be able to keep the DNA profile, but this ignores that those are bad and inaccurate and only has 16 markers, so a chance that one is damaged implicates the evidence as a whole. They're susceptible to moisture and temperature, and samples can be combined or incorrectly matched. That's S, so the profile won't be deleted upon acquittal because the person won't be acquitted because the DNA says that they're guilty, and profiles are super inaccurate because partial profiles have multiple matches, and every profile is a partial profile. They only accept 13 STR look at Feral 13. When decoding DNA, they 7 STR look at a great individual DNA profile, and that turns function creep. It just takes the place of regular DNA samples proving that the app doesn't do anything, so you can vote on presumption DNA profiling are used to inaccurately group substantive pools of race that show as hunger. I'll finish the evidence here. Nevertheless, the DNA analysis being used to create substantive pools reason for it. In addition to inadequate methods for overall sampling as well, population generalizing the validity of these small numbers locally 100 markers might be necessary analysis to your genetic markers might have a better correlation with phenotype. NGA. We'll concede the perm. It's just a test competition. 50 state fiat is a reason to reject the argument of the team. Politics will concede the no link, takes out in the offense on the flow. Back on board.
Good rejects. Okay. Let's talk about the all. You said it's an abolitionist pedagogy. Is there any material action that takes, or is it just thinking really hard?
So the argument that we're making is that the affirmation of like all of these like abolitionist movements that sort of challenge like the hegemonic.
Okay, the affirmation. So like I post a black square or something and I say I'm on this side. Does that mean that I've solved the alt?
We're not talking about like posting black squares. We're talking about like shifting our rhetorical frames.
Shifting our rhetorical. How does shifting the way I think tear down the prison?
Because it means that you are aligning yourself with abolitionist movements.
Wait. So let's get this straight. I think really hard and prisons just go away.
No, you think really hard and you engage in like the scholarship of abolition to sort of combat.
You keep talking about scholarship. Is there any materialism ever?
Our argument is that it potentially spills up to like these movements being able to overcome like the hegemony.
Okay, and what do these movements do?
The movements push for things like abolition, like the increase of social services so that the
Okay, so we get the government then because we talked about abolition to give us social services. That's the alt?
The alt is about everybody engaging in the thinking of abolition and the praxis and how that sort of.
Yeah, we think really hard. There's no materialism ever. Let's talk about framework. Do we get away with results of the plan?
Yeah, sure, you get to weigh the results of the plan.
Okay, against links.
Stuff on case means that the plan effectively does nothing, and the only thing so there's only.
But yeah, I just want to be super clear that we do get to weigh the results of the plan.
Yeah, but we also get like reform links because those are like predictable lists.
Yeah, for sure. Let's talk about the innocence link. There's people like who are already convicted with DNA. Why does the AF make this conception of innocence or whatever worse?
Because you keep the DNA for only people that are like acquitted, only the people that are innocent. Well,
that seems to be a reason the AF doesn't go far enough because we didn't reduce all of the DNA. Why doesn't the perm solve that?
No, the argument is that you have made the claim that right now DNA is perceived as objective and we fix all of the problems with DNA, which means that now it looks like it's fine. And even though there are fewer people convicted with profiles, all of those people is probably
I got more questions. Is the criminal justice system good to solve sexual assaults or stop them?
So negation theory says.
No, this is kind of a yes or no question. Is it or not?
I'll make the argument in the 2 and C that the CJS is good to do nothing. And
okay, so it's good for nothing. You've made a bunch of arguments about how should we be responsible for our rhetoric. Why shouldn't y'all be responsible for the rhetoric in the 1 and C where you said that it's good for solving sexual assault?
Because it's not reciprocal. The job of the app is to defend the plan.
Yeah, I get it. The neg gets to say whatever racist stuff you want as long as you've answered the app. Why shouldn't you be held to all of the stuff that you've said in the 1 and C? You made arguments about how your rhetoric's important.
No, we've made the argument that you're bad with this frame, but even if you were right with that frame, you are wrong because like.
Okay, so you get to say as many contradictory frames that like don't agree with abolition as you want in the 1 and C as long as you pare down to 1?
Yeah, because you have to defend the app. Like there are multiple people objecting to the app in like the real world, and the object of debate is to like.
I'll send it out. It should be sent. In the meantime, is everyone okay for an order? Okay. It is the NGA counterplan, the stimulus decide, and then the pick. Is anyone not ready? Awesome. Concede perm do both. It's just a test of competition. 50 safe fiat is a reason to reject the argument, not the team. We weren't 50 safe fiat, just one organization. The NGA, the politics, decide concede. No link takes out the internal link term because the plan doesn't impact whether or not stimulus passes the pick. The counterplan abolishes the collection of DNA from non-convicted person with the exception of the facilities that collect, process, prosecute, and sentence based on rape kits. This is necessary to correct for a long and storied history of sexual assault. Denial perm do both. Links to the net benefit. 1, tax DNA collection includes victim DNA collection. Those individuals won't be chasing charges or conviction. 2, collecting and testing sex occurs during investigation and before conviction and identifies who should be brought to the trial in the first place. NIG, no date. Testing and sex are the investigative process. The victim is offered to the perpetrator's DNA. Evidence collected goes into a sexual assault kit. That sex can be tested to identify the perpetrator. The sex is transferred to law enforcement, logged into evidence. 3, the only explanation of the perm would be collecting sex without actually losing them in court, which is uniquely traumatizing and contributes to a culture of fumbling the ball on sexual violence. Chairman 20. Untested evidence is unacceptable, and I'll tell you what, the people of the information here tested never tested the nationwide backlog can be eradicated. The existence of the backlog is societal failure to tackle sexual violence. If not one system, the perm to the app and all non-mutually exclusive might solve backlogs, but it doesn't matter because the affirmative makes but it doesn't matter because the affirmative precludes the possibility of prosecutions, which is above the perm to the counter plan. It severs the collection of sex evidence. Severance is a voting issue for fairness. It allows the F to become a moving target and spike out of links, which kills Nate ground. They say it's not a pick. DNA evidence is needed through CODIS to detect sex. That's effective, and if testing happened more frequently, cases could be matched up across multiple crimes, reducing rates of assault. Campbell 16. Of the 894 sexes, 419 the other profiles are uploaded in CODIS. Only 9% are conditional CODIS have read the 62%. Conditional CODIS have read 94% word review offender his heart. Trying to perpetrate sex testing. The sex was the best way of identifying the perpetrator. 156 CODIS, 186 are offenders. CODIS. The investigators now had a promising lead in 146 previously unresolved cases helped identify serial sexual assault. 1 sex had been tested and uploaded to CODIS cases which had been resolved for 8 years. That previously sex linked DNA across multiple crimes. Testing non-stranger sex identified patterns of serial sexual assault. The offenders was known to the victim in each case, so the pattern of serial sexual assault will only be more evident once the case or text with through some multiple crimes. The case may have proceeded differently if the first case had been proceeded. Possibly the offender would not have been free to commit the stranger rape a year later. The prosecutors decide 1 reject the logic of but people will just make a false sexual assault claims. It's the logic used by so many people in the world to avoid measures like believing victims. 2, unsustained by evidence. And obviously, if someone didn't commit sexual assault, they'd be found innocent. 3, sex are key to apprehend serial rapists, but to prevent any wrongful accusation, they need to answer the specific scenario. Campbell all 15. The other test rape is also significant that the city when sex are not only sexual offenders are apprehended when rapers are serial rape. Testing is also critical for exonerating those who have been falsely accused or survivors. Failure to test is a breach of faith, so they consider to the understanding that the case would be acted upon and testing rape says justice denied. The objectivity decide they're accurate in this case and help that was above. There's no warrant or evidence for spillover. Circumvention arguments also apply to the AF and they link, which was on the abolition case. The backlogs argument. It's 1, it's try or die. The pick solves the AF, which means that there's only a risk of a net benefit. 2, yes, it solves their evidence descriptive of the status quo and doesn't mean and doesn't assume the full force of DNA forensics all becoming concentrated on sexual assault kits. In addition to more funding, the solvency deficits group them. A, cross apply Campbell, they're effective and it's empirically proven. B, it's try or die. Even 1 more solved case is a reason to vote nay. And C, the counterplan solve lack of case prediction, but prosecution kit submission and kit processing are all key. Campbell et al. 12. DNA evidence is a significant predictor of higher case regression because it provides hard evidence that was clearly inferential. DNA evidence is not be useful in prosecution if the case is never collected. Survivors need to have information about forensic services impaired if the law enforcement submit the evidence kits to the crime and that there are more adequate resources for crime lines. This DNA evidence appears to be instrumental in the case outcomes. The picks are good. 1, interpretation. We get 1 pick with the solvency advocate. 2, incentivizes better plan text writing, which results in higher quality debates and prevents aspects. 3, Nate ground key to correct outside bias, especially on this huge criminal justice reform topic that is bidirectional and has no good generics. 4, advocacy skills takes enable better argument testing. 5, strategic thinking stops 2-way sandbagging and results in better argument development. 6, their interp is infinitely regressive. Every counterplan is a pick, but the lit based text to be a 7. Alternative is worse. We shifted reading state shady process counterplans, which turns their impacts. 8, reject the argument, not the team. And conditionality is good. 1, research dispo incentivizes teams to reprocess counterplans because they can't be straight turn. 2, Nate flex this incentivizes multiple competing strategies in fear of 2 AC straight turns. 3, real world policy making congressional debates jettison positions when they're recognized as wrong. 4, info processing multiple options. 4, 2 AC efficiency and strategy key to advocacy. Now defense. 1, diminishing returns check unlimited condo. 2, in our choice solves abuse. 3, air neg infinite app prep. They get to speak first and last. Bad neg generics in a massive topic that's also bidirectional. That means fairness comes first. Expectation of a level playing field is the only incentive for in-depth research. Reject the arg, not the team. 5, dispo doesn't solve clash or research. Still means teams can do what they say is abusive. Having offenses arbitrary counterinterp. We get what we did. Shruti, anything else?
Do you answer the underreporting stuff?
Yeah, the underreporting alt cause is obviously solved by the answers to the solvency deficit cards we read. It's also try or die, and not a reason why the counterplan is a bad idea.
Okay. We had 724. I'll start vote. Okay, we have 205. Let me send out the document and that'll give the order. Okay, the document was sent. The order is going to be the advantage, framing, the pick, the abolition case. Is anybody not ready to start? Well, I'm going to start in about 10 seconds if nobody says anything. This is on our polarization to boost towards our pre-crime future. We solved that independently drawn bioterroristic outweighs because it affects 14 million people. The code system, the lie by lie, the functioning by evidence. Zolan says the only samples can be sequenced because only they can take the entire genome, which means their evidence doesn't apply. The clue is we still reduce the scale. You need a sequence. You need a lot of samples, which means that we still don't allow for that. We delete our profiles of newborns from CODIS because they are having convicted of a trial or accused of a crime, which means that they still don't exist. Even so, the clue evidence is the bioterrorist narrow specific CODIS, but federal agencies lack of security guidelines. The prosecutor provides that the Aaron Cole stuff that I'll do on the case definitely takes this out, but also we don't increase it, which means that this is not offense against the case. Profiles are accurate. The Dolan Center stuff above answer that. Framing. They have a good phrasing. I'm just going to say that rejecting F for probabilistic things is bad. This is logic. Is going to kill and die people a chance of saving 10 is identical, which means you should reject the F for the chance of selling anything in the future. The pick. At the top, DNA is definitely bad, which means it fails for catching crimes. The Stratton evidence says that add a lab error samples and mislabeled crossing machine with unrelated DNA into greater contaminated, which makes accurate interpretation difficult. Human error increases pitfalls. So prosecutors decide to buy it. Cops and prosecutors and pressure lab tests to produce guilty results. The cause was past means that guilty criminals aren't caught. And even so, their evidence doesn't suit for the rapid DNA machines, which make it worse. Their manufacturers say the device is stuck, which is the gold standard. And prosecutors seek out false positives at gold standard 20. The investigators go to multiple labs to get the results. They want the two labs to get entirely different answers to the DNA with the talent changes to the amplifiers or eating a DNA sample. The device can easily produce error results. And numerous causes put the advanced rate at 0.08%. The DNA doesn't solve Anderson 19. That's the 1% of assaults after leads to prosecution. Only about 20% of the worst leads to arrest. Only half the arrest leads to trial. Only about 30% of assaults leads to conviction. And current disbelief, distrust, and mystery makes it more likely that rapists are prosecuted. And the reporting can be traumatic. The specter of the fatal allegation. Large all research shut the rare amount of coverage given to false allegations make them seem more common than they actually are. Creating an answer. It trust juries don't trust victims. And also they dropped the card that there's the DNA is relevant in most sexual assault cases because that's not the question of the case. It's not a question of whether or not they did it, but rather it's not a question of whether or not they did it because they mostly already know. And yes, pegs are bad. Their model justifies stuff like picking out of a comma or an author. She kills fairness because he can't from every one of 20,000 worth in the way. He also kills clash because they can cherry pick anything. And permutation to the app and on mutually so the card account solves internal net benefits only about funding for backlash, which doesn't exclude the app. And we can still take action the sexual assault will the app because those are all post conviction days. And permutation to both solve. We still allows for post conviction use of DNA and the objectivity DNA. They redeem the idea that DNA is good to casual sexual which leads they earn so close stuff in turns with is itself turns with all of their carcerality evidence. All the sex of the prosecutors say that it's not about face sexual assault, whether or not DNA is important. Underreporting is a massive cause because it disproves the idea of a trial die means that most cases already go underreported, and we have to change the culture, not the question to have. Abolition case. They agreed we get to win the plan, which is key to fairness and interpret research to the debate by moving even as we want to see offense is key to allow participation. They agreed. I'm just going to do that. There's no subjectivity defense here, especially because all the percons are percon is bad. There's no reason. It's just a reason to reject the argument. No reason we get to separate Rex because they don't resist the goal. You made arguments why subjectivity should always come first, but contradict them yourself. Theory does not answer the substantive content reason we get to kiss our reps. At the very least, it means the alternative framework does nothing because there's no subjectivity impact. A debate can't shape your ideology. It means they have no solvency mechanism. And also, so he said that it means that we get to kiss our reps. Their interpretation is undebatable. Every word has different meanings to different people. Top level framings only that way impacts that all alternative actually solve. They definitely don't solve for hegemonic structures or white supremacy or prisons by just shifting pedagogy. There's no reason why that leads to material action. We can't overcome things like white supremacy. No root cause either or reason why it hurts themselves. The carceral state can't control individual races or bad actions done by police or practice. Only legal things people in power abuse, and that's inevitable even in the world's alternative. All extend the permutation here. That's basic character gets honest. There's no trade-off between reducing violent DNA practices and material practices and abolition because the AF is a one-time event. It utilizes incremental reforms to inform the conditions for radical change. Even abolition that happen in increments. There's silver net benefits of the permutation. First, these are also just as the alternative. And first, it's the only way to solve the AF code is the federal database that can't be reformed. And two, is a surveillance is that cops use DNA collection to track down and crush the moons, which is a crackdown that was uniquely conceded. It lets them target individual organizers or protesters or break it down and empirically proven by arrests of standing armed protesters using DNA evidence or huge police presence. And third, stuff that's the Aaron so cool stuff. The AF breaks of the foundation of the carceral state by forming DNA that system legitimizes itself by appealing to forensic evidence of the epitome of Western rationality. That's a link to all of this innocent stuff. The innocent stuff is the link turn. We solve all the problems with CGR. Aims of the permutation definitely solves all the justifications, arguments, the reform, like the all the stuff about also energy emanating movements, and theoretically done by things like the rapid and first step act and all of Biden's criminal justice CGR actions. The alternative definitely there's a net link to the AF reduces the power of the states to surveil and control minorities by practice like honor simply, and there's no we don't increase convictions or innocence post out. The AF breaks down the rationale behind DNA usage now, which means that we break it down larger, and all of the links to the status quo conviction hungry judges and juries already exist. They also have to be responsible for the material consequences of the alternative. Anything else is argumented irresponsibility because it's vague and impossible to get, which sex education and that topic education just an analogy that's fill of all systems the alternative fails. There's no mindset shift. There's a distinction because they're hard to get that people can say they're against racial violence, but that still doesn't mean that they want to defund the police. Abolition can't materialize absent broad public support, and most still believe that the president is here to say which of the Lancaster evidence. It ensures the alternative results in civil violence and self-urbanization by white supremacists looking to secure order.
Okay, 513. Start it now. Wait, really quickly, reasons to reject the team was just picks, right?
Yes.
Okay, stop prep. Or yes, prep's over.
Sorry, Shruti, can you mute, please?
Okay, sorry. The order is the pick, the K, the case page. Okay, is anybody not ready? Cool. The app is the status quo for people whose SAKs go unreported and unprocessed, preventing victims from being held accountable for their actions and contributing to a culture of sexual assault denial, trauma, and lack of justice for survivors. A blanket denial of criminal justice, a blanket denial of DNA ignores the good that it can do for victims of sexual assault to find closure and justice and prevent victims from continuing to be able to affect this trauma. If the PIC solves all of the rest of cases, try it for any one person that. Any one victim of sexual assault that ends up getting reported and finding closure. That's all we need to solve for to outweigh the app. Sorry, that's all we need to solve for to outweigh the F1. Is that outweighs insurance case accountable solvency filters any impact you think they're winning. If you can't find an internal link from one of their solvency deficits to resolving a case impact, don't evaluate it. 2, scope hundreds of thousands of unresolved cases of evidence of prosecution and prevention of further sexual assault are completely precluded by the app. 3 serial rapists think please likelihood because there's no mechanism to catch everyone that says that the DNA was bad. It's good. Extend the Campbell evidence is hyper specific to the app stopping codage, which is a built-in answer to both the permutation and is independent study effectiveness, citing over 68% accuracy and codes and independent codes and independent successes for trials of it. Among those hits, 98 were previous offenders, 98% were previous offenders, which proves the majority of testing was key to serial rapists, which turns the prosecutors to said, but the prosecutors said they dropped the specific example from the Campbell 15 evidence too. It contributes to a specific culture of prosecutors, or you should not say that prosecutors overinflate the rates of sexual assault because that contributes to a culture of denial of sexual assault, but they can't use other people's DNA, otherwise it would have to be deleted if it was wrong because we do the rest of the act beyond sexual assault. If the prosecutor finds the false positive and then they get acquitted, then that means that, that means that the DNA would be deleted because we do the rest of the app. The Goldstein evidence isn't specific to sexual assault where there's a large presumption against the victim being correct. The all causes to conviction. The Anderson evidence is descriptive of the status quo because it says that fewer sexual assaults led to conviction than arrest and disbelief for victims. The counterpoint obviously solves it because it means that every case that the victim consents to is convicted and prosecuted for. Risk that the DNA evidence is good means that conviction becomes an automatic next step post-collection. No theory argument about what we fiat beyond the PIC beyond the PIC argument means that we get the full force of fiat about how the prosecutors have to prosecute for everything that there is a conviction for. The DNA irrelevant sub LJ answered this one. We solve the other reasons why cases don't get prosecuted, like prosecutorial denial and lack of funding. But 2, read the evidence. There are 2 lines highlighted in this card. The first part says that DNA is less important if the issue is consent, and the second part is completely different. It's talking about how prosecutors prosecute more cases when people know each other than when they do, which is immaterial to the consent question, especially when we hear that prosecutors prosecute everything that there is DNA evidence for. The perm does not mutually exclusive parts. 2 look like for competition here. It's mutually exclusive to collect SAK's DNA from the victim because the victim is not going to get convicted, and it's mutually exclusive to take SAK because they contain the DNA of the perpetrator who hasn't been convicted yet. Absent these, the only explanation of the perm would be collecting SAKs without actually using them in court, which is uniquely traumatizing. It contributes to a culture of fumbling the ball and sexual violence, which is uniquely violent. That's Sherman, and that's an impact they don't have any ink on. The perm do both stuff. Also links to net benefit. 1, SAK DNA collection includes the victim DNA collection. Those individuals won't be facing charges or conviction. 2, collecting and testing SAKs occurs during any investigation and before conviction. It identifies who should be brought into trial in the first place. Classify the work I did above on the first perm because these 2 are functionally the same. The objectivity just that they link to, so there's no the PIC's bad argument. Pigs are good. The 1 AR was too bloody for this to be an argument. 1, interpretation. We get 1 pick with the solvency. We get 2. It's better for clash. It incentivizes better plaintext writing, which results in higher quality debates and prevents app spikes. 3 night ground. Key to test the app side bias, especially on a huge. 3 night ground. Key to test the app side bias, especially on a huge criminal justice reform topic with 3 massive topic areas and no unifying generic. 4 advocacy skills. Pigs enable better argument testing. You should be able to defend all aspects of the app and defend that all DNA is bad. 5, strategic thinking. Stop 2 easy sandbagging results in better argument development. 6, their interest is infinitely regressive. Every counterplan is a pig out of something, but the lid-based checks abuse. 7, the alternative is worse for shit to reading shady process counterplans, which turns their impacts and doesn't involve in-depth research about the app, which is the whole point of debate. 8, reject the argument, not the team. The objectivity just said they link to there's no offense differential. There's no offense differential. The app retains the DNA profile for individuals found guilty. They bind to the rhetorical idealization of the objectivity of DNA through pointing to the profiles as good. That was the Aronson and Nicole 9 evidence that they just have no ink on, which means that it's a weird solvency deficit that they also link to, but it doesn't even link to an impact. So the risk of the net benefit outweighs it. The underreporting stuff, obviously, the 1, it's try or die for any victim of sexual assault to get closure because we solve the rest of the app. But 2, increased reporting and increased prosecution would solve the culture of being underreported because they're no longer afraid of having to get SAKs tested without them actually being prosecuted, which is violent, and the perm links to it, or without being, disbelieved, which the counterpoint solves. Our specific studies and percentages on like the specificity of like sexual assault kits being good in this case are better than generic lab error. especially because DNA is the only thing that allows for this proof because nobody ever listens to the victim. I guess K will concede the perm. It's just test competition. No offense to the flow. Perf Connor's reason to reject the argument, not the team. They didn't make a reason. It didn't say it was a reason to reject the team. So case, I guess. Extend 1AC1 function creep goes the other way. That's 1AC Whitehead. The government mandates genetic screening of newborns at birth, which is stored indefinitely in shed DNA. Isn't formally collected during the criminal justice process, and police cooperate with companies like 23andMe to gain access to your DNA. There's a big framing issue here. Either this thing is true and the police get access to your DNA, and either this is true and the police get access to your DNA, which turns the app, or prosecutors who use false conviction rates to get more DNA can't use it. So the pick solves.
206, start. I'm gonna go fill my water real quick before I start. Order's gonna be the case and then the pick. If anyone's not good, let me know now.
Hey, can you mute yourself on our call?
For sure. Awesome. Greenhill lost this debate in the 1NC when they didn't read any arguments that remotely answer the thesis of the app. We have said that the forms of DNA are bad, but they have said that no, we should retain DNA around that. I'm going to go for a couple of specific impacts that definitely outweigh any risk of a pick that especially isn't usually exclusive with the affirmative. First is biotier, just outweighs on scope. Our read card says that there are 14 million people in CODIS, which means that continuing to take profiles and samples from those people enables the idea of biotier, gives any of those 14 million people only a risk that outweighs the minuscule, maybe 1 or 2 people is a possibility of the pick resolving, so they don't resolve anything. Second, I'm gonna go for the collateral incentives argument. The Traeger card is fantastic on how there's an incentive to arrest people for no reason, just to put their DNA in the database, which means that it increases things like police brutality against black and brown folks because they are automatically going to be suspicious of these people. Definitely proves a solvency deficit to the counterplan because they'll continue over-risking these people who they view as prone to rape because cops are fucking racist. The third argument I'm going to go for is the pre-crime argument in the Thomas card, which says that state tries to figure out certain categories of people from DNA and tries to predict if people will supposedly do crimes in their life, means that they'll just collect sexual assaulters' DNA and try to screen it to figure out what types of people supposedly are going to be sexual assaulters, causes things like preemptive arrests of people. Look, it's going to be minority report unless in the world of the counterplan, which is obviously not worse. The only real argument they made here is that function kit goes the other way. Their cards are pretty bad from 2004, comparatively worse than our evidence, which is specifically why samples and profiles are specifically bad. But this doesn't answer our scenarios about why CODIS and cop arrests specifically are bad. Being able to take them because of CODIS is specifically worse. There's no other real arguments here to pick. At the top, the permutation definitely solves perm to the app and all mixed exclusive parts of the counterplan. Look at the card they read in the 1NC. It's not about CODIS or anything. It's just about funding for sexual assault stuff, which means that we can definitely both fund sexual assault stuff at the same time as we do the app. Definitely resolves any risk of an internal net benefit because that's what their cards are actually in the context of. Means that there's no chance of mutual exclusivity. Look, the app has said that DNA, there's no mutual exclusivity. The app has said that DNA is used at conviction can still be used. We just changed things like the on-arrest sampling of DNA, which means that if someone is being convicted and tried of being a rapist and they can still use that evidence, means that there's no mutual exclusivity with the perm. You should read the text of the app, but they have applied it specifically to rape kits. Definitely doesn't apply to the app. Look, I'll detail this out. Rape kits are a thing that is given consensually. When someone is raped, they have a rape kit and they give it consensually to prosecutors. The app bans cops coming in, taking people's DNA without their consent, which is not what their cards are in the context. So definitely proves there's no risk of mutual exclusivity, especially when the two are super loud on this question. I'm gonna go for DNA bad because they're just way behind on this question. The 1AC student card has a couple of instances that they haven't answered really. It talks about, first of all, it talks about how there's just people are just bad at using DNA. There are things like lab error, people mislabel samples and stuff, which causes a hybrid of false positives. Means that there are wrongful convictions because of the pick, which is definitely a bad thing. Second is the prosecutor's argument, which is gonna be a DA later because we've read that specific Goldstein card, which is pretty good, and how because labs are really shitty at doing DNA analysis, prosecutors will just go to other DNA labs to try to get false positives and do things like bribe them in order to get false positives. Definitely proves that they get the wrong people. Their argument about how this buys into a bad culture of masculinity, that doesn't matter. We shouldn't hold people who didn't do things accountable. It only means that the people who weren't actually the rapists get prosecuted, which is actually net worse because it means that the real rapists continue to run free, which is worse under their model. But we've read specific evidence. We don't have to endorse a societal standpoint, especially when they haven't extended a specific impact to it. The prosecutors thing is definitely really good. They'll just try to seek out false positives to wrongfully convict people, which is the worst of both worlds because it causes massive wrongful convictions, and definitely dovetails really well with all of the arguments that we've gone for on case because it proves that cops and prosecutors who are already suspicious of black and brown folks will just seek out black and brown folks and think that they are probably rapists because the cops and the prosecutors are racist, which causes all of the impacts that the app has said are a bad idea. You should also read the 1AC Goldstein card. The Goldstein card is fantastic. It's a tiebreaker on this question because it proves that DNA analysis doesn't even work. Cops and prosecutors use rapid DNA machines who the company that made these machines says that they literally do not work for DNA analysis, which proves that they get tons and tons of false positives. The 1-era Anderson card should put the risk of the net benefit to 0%, even if the tutor mentions how a larger culture of dismissing sexual assault cases is the reason why prosecution doesn't happen now. The fact that there's DNA testing now and the conviction rate is astronomical, though, is 0.8%, proves that they solve basically nothing. The objectivity DA from Anderson actually solves this because it breaks down the worst excess of the carceral state, legitimizes. Actually, we're not making an argument that people make false accusations all the time. We're saying that DNA is not the correct mechanism. The pick doesn't solve that. We need to change the larger culture, which they definitely don't do by doing just one specific instance of reform. But we've launched a couple of arguments. The Murphy card is fantastic on this question. Says that in each sexual assault case, in I think it was Arizona, there were 122 false positives. Means that the rate of them actually catching the right person is less than 1%. So they comparatively solve basically nothing because the vast majority of the time they don't solve anything. But they also conceded that Yeah, the objectivity DNA is a pretty good tiebreaker. They still think it's a solvency deficit because they still think DNA can be good in some of the time. They've also conceded that it's usually not a question of if you did it, but a question of consent in the majority of cases, which means they don't solve.
Good debate, you all.
Good debate.
Good debate.
Do people want a card doc?
Yeah, let's get card docs going.
Okay. The app card doc is sent.
Night card actually sent.
10-minute warning on the decision deadline. Thank you. 10 minutes.
Okay, we have a decision. Could everyone please come back? Okay. Congratulations to both teams on making it to the quarters of the Emory tournament. Big accomplishment. The decision is a 2-1 for the affirmative from Liberal Arts and Science.
Hey, I sat. I'm not surprised because I thought this was a difficult debate to judge because there was not a lot of comparison or explanation and instruction on how to weigh impacts. I ultimately voted negative for a couple of reasons. I didn't think that there is an explanation of how the AF functions in the world of the PIC. And by that, I mean explanation of what the AF impacts there are that are predicated solely off of the DNA testing enabled by the PIC and not that the rest of the PIC solves. So in my mind, that eliminates the bioterror scenario because there is no explanation of how that would function. And it becomes a question of the relative risk of the potential racial bias in targeting against testing for rape kits versus the risk of justice for some rape survivors and potentially capturing serial offenders. I thought that the neg framing characterized and quantified that they only needed to win, that one or two survivors could potentially outweigh any of the AF impacts, but that the AF was harder to quantify because there was no evidence specifically pointing to the profiling in the instance of sexual assault, and because that the counterplan resulted in the majority of the AF. I thought that the AF wins that there will be some profiling through DNA in sexual assault cases, but if the neg wins their framing, then the mechanism can resolve at least a few cases of assault, and that is the priority given their explanation. For my ballot, the AF needs to debate the case versus the PIC, not versus a sexual assault disad. And by that, I mean acknowledge that the neg does the majority of the AF. In the absence of otherwise quantified framework and without instruction on how to determine that the PIC solves those levels of racism through doing most of the plan, I don't have a framework to quantify the impacts specific to the PIC. In terms of the defense you all presented, I think that the unreported assault, known perpetrators, and lack of prosecution are all not relevant to this version of the PIC because the counterplan mandates prosecution using that evidence, and it only has to be in the cases when DNA information would be relevant. The area that gave me the most pause was about the accuracy of DNA prosecution. And I also think this was the area with the least comparison in the debate. So looking at the serial cases that the neg says were solved versus the risk of false positives and inaccuracy in DNA function without instruction of how to evaluate, I draw my own conclusions from the evidence that deleting the evidence of innocence after the trial resolves at least some of that risk. The last thing I looked at was the permutation. There's not a lot of explanation of how that functions, but I think in terms of the parts of the pick that are not mutually exclusive, but the neg does have clear evidence tying CODIS to specific DNA, which I think means that the perm doesn't solve the majority of what the neg is trying to do.
Yeah, I can go. This was extremely close and ultimately very frustrating to resolve due to a lack of resolution in the final rebuttals. I might be in the minority here, but I ultimately voted AF on the perm. More accurately, I voted AF on not really understanding the link to the net benefit. It's difficult because both sides spend relatively little time on the perm in the last few speeches, at least compared to the amount of time that I think should have been spent here. What it means is not really debated out, and there's not really a clear explanation from the neg anywhere in the debate about which DNA collection specifically the plan would prohibit that you're picking out of. So I spent some time reading both the plan and the counterplan text. The only point of difference is the amendment to the part of the plan about prohibiting the collection of DNA samples to append the exception DNA samples collected from rape kits. Problem is, from my reading of the plan and the AF's explanation throughout their speeches, it's not clear the plan prohibits rape kit collection. They likely would preclude the collection and profiling of the victim's DNA, since the victim obviously hasn't been charged with a crime. From what I understand about rape kits and storing the DNA from an individual, it's more of a collection of biological evidence from the scene. So some from the victim's body, clothing, bedding, is examples that your cards give as well, but not the taking of DNA from an individual, which is what the plan as written seems to prohibit. The analogy is if post-AF, if the police were investigating a murder, they could presumably still collect and process DNA from a blood sample from the crime scene as evidence, and then compare that to people charged with a crime, which is why the AF leaves open the exception for people that are facing charges. So I think the perm means that rape kits can still be tested and processed, and the AF makes the other argument that they still allow for DNA evidence to be collected after people are accused of a crime and charged with a crime, so long as it's deleted if they're acquitted. I think that being able to collect the DNA of somebody facing charges and then compare that against rape kits, which the counterplan fiats the government test and prosecute, seems to solve enough of the net benefit of closure for rape victims. I think there might be a deficit based upon not being able to test the DNA of mere arrestees, but the neg has said that testing against CODIS is the critical internal link because most people are repeat offenders. Both sides agree that arrests usually occur based upon people that the victims know, and I think that the false positive stuff would also outweigh in that case. This is particularly true given the answers to the perm in the block M2 and R. The first argument was about victim DNA collection, which as I already explained, I don't really understand the necessity of that in terms of the net benefit. The card about CODIS you read seems to substantiate the AF's argument that says that since samples can be compared with existing DNA profiles, it's not important necessarily that we need the DNA of arrestees to solve the net benefit. So ultimately, since I don't really understand the link card or argument advanced that uses the language of the plan and explains why that precludes rape kit collection, it means that I didn't really need to evaluate anything else, which is good because I'm really not sure how I would have evaluated false positives against closure for sexual assault victims.
I agree with Tyler in terms of the way that I evaluated the permutation. I will say that I think the most confusing part about this is the way that the perm text is written, perm all non-mutually exclusive parts of the counterplan. The thing that I thought about the most was how much I was willing to read into the counterplan to decipher what exactly you meant by the non-exclusive parts of the counterplan. So it seems pretty intuitively clear to me that like the first plank of the counterplan is obviously included in the permutation because there's no sort of basis of DNA collection predicated in that plank. And then it's like sort of like a weird mishmash of the rest of the planks all put together to determine exactly what DNA is admissible, what can be collected, et cetera, et cetera. But I agree with Tyler's assessment of sort of taking the victim's DNA, the way that it would play out. And I think that the permutation resolves a large part of the net benefit. The difficulty here is just like, in terms of weighing the two things against one another, how much is enough of the net benefit to resolve before I can be like, yes, I think the permutation is sufficient, because it's obviously an impossible thing to quantify. And you know, that is sort of to echo what the other two have said, it's just like there's no comparison, there's no impact arguments made in like the 2NR or 2AR. Neither speech makes anything particularly clear. So at that point, I'm kind of left to do that judgment on my own. I think that there's like some potential residual net benefit to the permutation in the sense of the like 1AC pre-criminalization solvency deficit. I do understand the like argument that's like there's no evidence that's specific to DNA collection on the basis of sexual assault. But to me, it was like the 1AC evidence, I forget which card it is. It's the card that uses the phrase pre-criminalization in the tag or whatever. That I could draw a sort of intuitive story and explain how that would apply to the pick. And that was like a reasonably salient solvency deficit, although not super persuasive and obviously not backed by very specific evidence. And I just thought that that risk of the solvency deficit was larger than the risk of the net benefit to the counterplan that wasn't solved by the permutation. And the reason you make that determination is just because it's impossible to quantify the difference between the net benefit resolved by the perm versus the net benefit resolved by the counterplan alone. And so if I think that there's like a somewhat salient risk of the solvency deficit, then that alone is probably going to be enough to outweigh, given I can't quantify that difference. So like thrust of the ballot is just voted on the permutation and made the same sort of determination Tyler made about what the perm entails. So that's like the substantive part of the decision. But I would say that both sides would benefit a ton from just like explaining things more in the final rebuttals. That like inevitably when this is the 2NR and this is the 2AR, you're going to get 2 1s because people just like interpret things differently. And like, we all need to like fill in what we think about certain things just because of the lack of explanation that's done. And so you want to make a point to be more explanatory in your final rebuttals. And then the other thing I'll say is that I kind of was liking the K. I was kind of like good. I kind of liked what you were doing with the K, except when 2NC cross X happened. So like after the 2NC, I was like, yeah, this K is actually pretty reasonable. The alt definitely solves the case if you're right about what the alt does. But then 2NC cross X happened and the alt became nothing. So I would say to like for strategic advice, shape up your explanation of what the alt does for 2NC cross X and then just go for the K. I think that could help. And then the other thing is like do some more argument characterization of what the AF said. So like when the AF is like perm all non-mutually exclusive parts of the counterplan, in the 1NR, it's really important for you to be like, here's exactly what this permutation means. Here's the parts of the counterplan it can do. Here's the parts that it can't do. And here's the impact to the difference between those two things. Making that clear bolsters the impact to the net benefit that can't be solved by the perm and also prevents the 1AR and 2AR from reclarifying what the perm means, which you sort of ran into in this debate because the perm morphed from the 2AC to the 1AR and 2AR. The last thing is I had a lot of trouble flowing the 1AR, like both for speed and internet reasons. A lot of the 1AR was really difficult to flow. And so I honestly had a tough time like trying to figure out what parts of the 2AR I thought were new and what were actually based in the 1AR. And like, maybe it's my mistake, but I sort of gave you the benefit of the doubt more so than I didn't. But for the semis, just like maybe go a little bit slower in the 1AR and do more argument labeling, numbering, stuff like that. That'll go a long way for the judges understanding everything you're saying.
Thank you. Is it all right if LASA leaves to prepare next round? Cool. Thanks. We'll email y'all if we have any questions. Good debate, y'all.
Good debate. Good luck. I had a couple of questions. Was the like resolution of the SAK stuff on the perm that SAKs aren't collected from the victim but from the scene? Or was it like SAKs are collected from the victim, but there are other things like collected from the scene that they can perm and that like results in a benefit, I guess?
As I understand it, the plan as written prohibits the collection of DNA from an individual. And I just didn't understand necessarily why a rape kit, although it would, by effect collect biological residue from the scene and like from the victim to some extent, that's not the victim's DNA, right? It's somebody else's DNA that we aren't collecting from an individual, but we're collecting as evidence from a crime. And so it doesn't really fall into how the affirmative has explained their case, which is just prohibiting police from collecting the DNA, forcibly collecting the DNA from people who have not been charged with the crime.
Oh, okay, wait, a couple of questions. So the like NIJ evidence says that testing an SAK comes from like the victim being swabbed. So was there like a place in the 2NR where I could have said something like, this is what they are trying to say, and here's the answer to that in this piece of evidence? Or like because I didn't know that they were asking, or that the competition argument was that it came from the person at the scene and not the way they explained it, which was like, it comes with consent and not like being forced. Or is that the argument that you voted on?
I would say that, so my reading of that evidence is that it's collecting DNA from the victim because the DNA happens to be on the victim's body, not because the DNA belongs to the victim. And so the way I ultimately evaluated it was that the plan as written and how the affirmative has intended to explain the plan is that the plan would only prohibit the collection of DNA from a particular individual, so the possessor of that DNA. I think it is entirely possible that you could make like the argument that the plan would prohibit the collection of rape kits themselves, but I think that would have needed significantly more time in the final rebuttals. And also I would just like push back on their, like you should just say the affirmative may intend this to be how the plan functions, but they've miswritten their plan text. And here we have evidence that uses the language of the plan and says that they've actually closed this loophole as well.
I would say I agree with Tyler, and then this is the sort of thing that I was talking about argument characterization, because it's like if you have that moment in the 2NR where you're talking about the perm where you're like, this is what they have said the perm means, our evidence clearly establishes this difference between the two, XYZ, sort of doing all the things that Tyler said, that I think would go a long way. Because as of right now, you're basically debating a perm that didn't really make itself clear up until the 2AR, which isn't necessarily your fault, but like the argument is there earlier in the debate, and like the 2AR isn't like entirely brand new. Like you can logically extrapolate it from things that were said earlier, which is why doing that argument characterization earlier in the debate will get you ahead, because then you can start a speech ahead of the AF in terms of defining what their arguments are.
Okay, so like from means like belonging to. That totally makes sense. I'd kind of like written off the perm because I didn't realize that was the argument that they were making. But like, thank you all so much for judging.
Thank you so much for judging.
Great tournament.